So you're here for mystery theory. All right, who the hell's Johnny Worthen? You're saying, Johnny Worthen, you're handsome, you're lovely, I see you all the time. You have the best choice in clothes ever. Your shoes make me cry for love. Who is he? Well, let me tell you who I am. I'm Johnny Worthen, damn it. And here's my books. I write books. I write multiple genres. My debut was an occult thriller. I consider it a horror. No, I consider it a mystery, a thriller, and that's Beatrice. So the ones that I put them in, I put in yellow, the ones that I consider mysteries or close to. And that'd be Beatrice, The Brand Man, and The Finger Trap, which won this year the Diamond Quill for the best published book of the year in Utah. Available at a store near you. I'm an associate instructor at the University of Utah, and I teach a 6-week course on mystery. I'm in the middle of it now, week 3. What you're going to see here is kind of a condensation of my first 2 classes, plus an LTUE love. I'm going to pull back on some information. I'm going to give you special stuff that no one else gets anywhere else. So if anybody who's taken my class will get something new out of this, if only because there's a picture of me that shouldn't be here. Anyway, so I teach this stuff. I love this. I have a BA and an MA in English and cultural criticism. I am the writer that came to this craft the wrong way. I did not study creative writing per se in college. I studied criticism. I'm that jerk who walk up to an author and tell them what the book's about and dare them to argue with me, because I know more than they do. So that's where I started. Anyway, that's who I'm. That's another story. I got a book released anyway. So I love mysteries. Mysteries are ultimately my favorite genre. And mysteries, go ahead and give me the next one. I'm not even sure what my order is. Let's talk about mystery. Now, the word genre comes from the French meaning, whatever the hell you want it to mean. So, I have no idea what it means. But genre, as you know, is basically, everybody can tell you, discuss genre, but the best definition of genre you're ever going to hear comes right now. Genre means the shelf that the bookstore will put your book upon. Anything else is irrelevant. However, as far as detective stories go, and mysteries are a very modern, recent addition to the literary canon of the Western world. Romance, we can go back. Epic poems got a few years behind it, believe it or not. Those people think you're changing the world right now by writing an epic poem. It's been done. Okay, thrillers, even, all these different modern genres that we talk about. All these different genres, whether it's romance. I mean, paranormal romance, believe it or not, is a new genre. Maybe those people who didn't know that Twilight kind of started its own genre. Horror didn't begin. Horror began actually at the same moment that mystery did, but we'll get to that. So you're looking at mystery, thinking, Johnny, I love you, man, but you're wrong. Think about it. Bible, there's a mystery story. Cain kills Abel. Duh, God the detective has to interview people. Don't ask me. But these stories are not the same true mysteries that we now have come to understand. The history of ancient mystery or ancient crime is a story of hubris. It is the story of, it is secondary. It usually doesn't carry on through the third act. It's just there to begin things. It's a conflict flavor. It's not a genre. Oedipus, somebody killed my dad. I wonder who it is. Mom, do you know? You know, that was a crime story, right? Oedipus kills his father and hunts down the killer. Then he finds out somebody's sleeping with his mom, and he's really mad. Cain and Abel, I mentioned. Hamlet. Hamlet is a murder mystery until Polonius, for some damn reason, confesses. Hi, honey. Those drapes are moving funny. Let me tell you why I killed your husband. Oh, Lord. Anyway, but that's how it works. But the true mystery that we understand it now is a completely different animal. And I'll describe it, and I'll show you very, very vividly, for those of you with a very graphic mind, the Freytag pyramid of a mystery. But for right now, understand that the mystery that we talk about here, as a mystery that falls into mystery, is the story of a problem. The story it begins with the creation of a problem and ends with a solution. It is the story of a puzzle. But hey, it didn't always happen. When did it happen? When did it start? Who can we blame for this? It must be that Agatha Christie. No! It was Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is by far the most influential author in American history, whether we Many people put him up there. Oh, well, Twain was great. Hemingway seems to have some legs. That Steinbeck did something, didn't he? But Poe single-handedly invented two modern genres. Horror, as we know, with the psychological aspects, did not exist before Poe's short stories. And the murder mystery. Both originated from Edgar Allan Poe in 1841. The first one was Murders in the Rue Morgue. Who's read this? I'm sorry. Oh, Lord, but believe it or not, it started something. Yeah, it's the orangutan. I'm sorry, I threw it for you. And he invents a detective who uses, I forgot the word, he uses deduction to read the situation and the setting and the interview to solve the puzzle. It's never been done like this before, ever. This is brand freaking new. And as with anything new in America, we totally ignore it. He writes two more stories with C. Auguste Dupin. And they are also ran. The man, and his horror stories didn't do much better, FYI. He made all his money on one poem. Everything, imagine us today. I wrote a poem, I'm set for the rest of my life. Screenwriters don't get that. Stephen King's still pouring them out. You know, he can't, well, okay, he's done. But no, The Raven, everything, he was known as a poet. The short stories were, oh, by the way, can you take this? I got to think, I had this bad dream about a cat. Can you take this? Anyway, however, his stories, totally ignored in America, made no money on them, were stolen and taken to France. And the French translated them and read them. And he was appreciated in his time in France, who didn't have to pay him a penny for his work. Anyway, so Jerry Lewis and Edgar Allan Poe have something in common. I don't know. One day we'll look at Jerry and say, that guy was great. Anyway, but he started it, and it took a while. He had no imitators for a long time. Give me the next slide. There were a few jumps. It took 20 years before, in the English-speaking world, another detective appeared. And no, it wasn't this one. It was The Moonstone by Collins, a contemporary of Charles Dickens. And when Dickens died, his last book, his unfinished book, was a mystery. So it was being born then. Had Dickens got a mystery out before he died, things probably would have been different. Instead, Wilkie Collins did it. And then 20 years later, after The Moonstone, which is itself a problematic, but a true detective story in the traditional modern sense. Then this guy comes around. His name is Sir Conan Doyle. Later, the Queen gave him the title of Arthur. Wait. Other way. They don't all work. They don't all work. Anyway, he invents Sherlock Holmes. And here is where the rubber hits the road, and we have a phenomenon. Sherlock Holmes was first written up in a novel in 1887 called A Study in Scarlet. We all know Sherlock Holmes stories, but who knows this one? Raise your hand if you've read A Study in Scarlet. Can anyone tell me why this book might not be the most read book in modern times? You want to say it?
Not very nice about Utah and the Mormons.
The Mormons are the villains. It's been tried to be made a couple of times, but it's never got traction. But in 1887, the Mormons were just another crazy cult, and so that was an easy thing. It sold well. The book did well at the time. Not super spectacular. Then he started publishing short stories in a little rag of a trashy, buy it and throw it away magazine called The Strand. And he started a phenomenon. And it equated, by the way, which is a magical thing about how mystery was born and evolved, into an age of literacy. And in England, the working class was literate now because of the literacy efforts of the previous years. England could read. So on the train going to work, they could read, and they loved these things. They came out of the idea that there was something called the penny dreadfuls before the Strand. And the penny dreadfuls were salacious, full of murder and mayhem, not detective stories. They were the kind of thing you read under the bed. You don't want the wife, how there is, erase my magazine collection when I die, right? That's the kind of thing that these penny dreadfuls were. But the Strand brought it up a step, gave us a detective who was interesting, gave us a narrator we could connect with Watson. Wonderful story. Anyway, I must get too far. It's serialized, and for the first time, it inspired imitation. Holmes hit. Everybody was now writing mysteries. And we don't know who they are because we don't read them anymore, but it started things. And it was a huge phenomenon. At this point, mysteries are a thing. Give us the next one. Then comes the Golden Age. And by the way, at this point, hey! Anyway, the Queen.
Oh my God, it's calling.
sorry. Nobody walks out at me. I'm a murderer. But okay, then the Golden Age hits, right? Now the Golden Age is the time between the wars in England, right? Notice we're now in England because America's got its own problems. America's working toward the Western genre. But in England, murder starts coming up. And between the wars and the Golden Age, as Agatha Christie will attest, there was no place more dangerous to be than at a dinner party with a Belgian. Your chances of surviving that night were 1 in 12. Surviving for the next 2 months, 1 in 4. Okay, but this was the situation we had. And it blossomed and it ballooned. And the magic here, similarly, as Holmes had come out in a magazine, cheap publishing had arrived. And these books were the movies of their times. There were lines out the door like that haven't been seen in England since until J.K. Rowling. People were passing books out, sharing chapters, huge phenomenon, all these things. I got my problems with her, but anyway, as far as this, she invented 2 totally endearing detectives, and that was Hercule Poirot, the Belgian, and Miss Marple, who they keep trying to make work in America. Stop trying to make Miss Marple work in America. Miss Marple's superpower is she's nosy. She overhears people. That is not good for an American audience. On top of that, we can't appreciate the fineries of an old woman having tea. But the Belgian fish out of water, globally, translated into every language, including Klingon. It's still running hot. In America, we have S.S. Van Dyne, who pulls out Philo Vance, another classed character. It's interesting to know, particularly in these early things, including back to Edgar Allan Poe, there was a very class level. In order for you to solve a crime by the aristocrats, you must be an aristocrat. In the Moonstone, they have a detective, a working class guy who solves the crime wrong. A gentleman must step in and correct it for him, because the killer is a member of the gentry, and he just didn't have the mental intellect to do it. Poirot is a fish out of water, and he can move up and down, so that's it. But at this point, we get an idea of a fair play or a plot puzzle. Many people thought Agatha Christie, they call it a plot puzzle. Now this is the Sudoku of the time, all right? Did you figure it out? Well, if it's a fair play puzzle, you could do it. In America, anybody even read any Ellery Queen? Good man. Ellery Queen is an American writer, and 2 writers under one name, supposedly first person. But while you're reading the book, hold that, Dory. Push it on. We'll get to that. Okay. But all right, so the Golden Age is when all this is happening. It's very, very nice. But in America, as these stories start coming over, Poirot's read, we have Philo Vance, we have several other American detectives coming out. Something strange happens in crime mystery theory, and that is noir. And unlike the predecessors, including Arthur Conan Doyle, who got his knighthood later in his life, at the time of the writing of these stories, they were recognized as works of art and literature. So the genre at this point has matured enough, at least in America, because of it. And it's because of the Black Mask, which is like the Penny Dreadfuls in the Strand. The man that bought it said, I want you to write these salacious, bloody, girl in danger stories, but I want you to write it like Hemingway was going to write it. And we got great writing. The 2 people I have here are Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. And they, one of the favorite lines, I think, Chandler said of Hammett that he gave murder back to the people who would actually commit a murder. In Agatha Christie, there's a reason why the game Clue is based on Agatha Christie's, because it's just a convenient body, and it could be anybody in the room with the candlestick at any time, depending on what cards you have. Totally irrelevant. It's just throw these different pieces in there. It was a convenient plot puzzle. But when we hit noir, we're now into grit. And we have some changes here. The detective is not of the classes that he's investigating. He doesn't like them. There is no homage given to class and race. Class, wealth are actually bad things for the most part. The Big Sleep, fantastic book. The killer gets away. He lets the killer escape because he just can't do anything to stop it. Hard-drinking, cynical, true American literature. Whereas over here, where Agatha Christie's saying, oh, look how lovely we are having tea, oh, there's a body, but what a bother. Here we have, he was a pornographer, but somebody shot him. So it's a different vibe entirely. And we start getting into crime stories, which is like a mystery, but it's more crime-based, where it's not who done it, maybe it can be how done it, why done it. We start twisting the donuts a bit. After noir, it's difficult to trace a direct path of the mystery genre. It explodes as a mature genre as in the 50s. You gonna say?
Are these crime stories that you just identified the same as the ones that you've identified on your first slide?
Not at all.
Okay.
They're coming around, though. Funny you mentioned that. They are coming around.
Yeah.
Whereas the original stories, the crime, the conflict, was partially as a hubris because that was the theme. Later we arrive, and this is what I teach, when you arrive and you write a mystery now, you'll come back to this and you'll make the crime emblematic of the theme. But here the idea is a puzzle. The Big Sleep, the crime story, we call it a mystery because it is. It begins with a crime and ends with the solution of the crime. That's it. But then now we have so many different subgenres, including this really excellent book by Johnny Worthen here, and this really excellent book by Johnny Worthen. But there's a lot of them out there, and it's a mature running genre. How much time do I have? Who's got a clock? All right, good. All right, we'll move on. But here are some of the major subgenres of mystery, and I will make these slides available if anybody emails me. I should keep my cards. Anyway. The cozy, we all know cozy, closest thing to Agatha Christie. Minimum amount of blood, a puzzle to be solved. Often the cat has something to do with the solution. The caper, also always fun, very exciting crime story. Ocean's 11, those kind of stories, very, very good. Get you into the crime often, and here the protagonist is the criminal. Police procedurals, we've had them up to here, and they're still happening. You know, I thought they were done with Starsky and Hutch. I figured, hey, you can't go anywhere after this, man. PI, all right? Magnum did a good job, but they're still around. Historical, Cadfile. It's basically now the genre is getting to subgenres to the point where it continues to evolve and roll. It's an amazing, I put legal. We've seen a lot of good legal. Perry Mason still plays, believe it or not. You watch one of those old movies, that works. The Lincoln Lawyer would be a good one as well. Psychological suspense, never done better than the Silence of the Lambs. That's a different thing. That's a different crime story. We're moving over. Forensics, I mean, who can't forget Quincy? Hell, who's seen Quincy? We are dating ourselves, my friends. All right.
What's Jack Reacher?
Torturer. That's actually, where would we put Jack Reacher? I mean, if you're actually put on this list, but where would we put that? That's kind of a thriller. More
Private investigator.
PI, okay, yeah. And espionage, which I consider part of it. James Bond is nothing more than a glorified detective. Oh, Spectre's got the secret weapon, or do they? No, maybe this woman does. I'll see. She looks like naked and make the decision. You know, I don't know. That's how he works. But the magical thing about this is as mystery has evolved, it has piggybacked directly onto mass media. And this is one of the reasons why it is such a vibrant, enduring genre. So with magazines, books, plays, radio, movies, you can follow it all the way through. Whatever's there happening now, mystery is in the forefront. Now, I don't know if it's being piggybacked or the crest of the changes is there, but it's interesting. No other genre followed this. Western tried for a while and faltered. Science fiction tried here and there, didn't do it. But the mystery and the crime, from this birth, it has been joined at the hip with mass media and popularity. It's an amazing genre. So why? Say, Johnny, why?
Johnny.
This is we're going to start dissecting it now, give you some useful information. Those of us who write must understand there is a meta magic to the mystery. Write that down. It is a story about another story. Okay, this is the mystery theory I want to tell you about. There's a story that happens before the book even begins. And the story of your book, what you will write, is the detection, the investigation of the first story. When I teach mystery, the first thing I have my class do is write the first story. I don't care who your detective is. I don't even care where you placed it. I want to know who did what and why. That's it. What was the crime? Come true out. Basically, when people say they write mysteries backwards, you write a mystery backwards. You've heard that? Anybody?
Yeah.
Right. This is what they're talking about. They know the ending because the ending is the first story. Those of you who like to pants can still write mysteries, but I hate you. You can be done. A lot of great writers do this. It comes down to whether God's a pantser or a plotter, and you're a God, so decide. But I believe it's so the story of the crime is investigated in story 2. It begins with the mystery, it ends with the answer, and it's a self-reflexive genre. Now we have 2 main stories in here. But while you're detective, you're sleuth. We'll call him a sleuth. Whether it's Clouseau or James Bond. While they investigate, while they're having their story, story 2, they're looking for story 1. People find story 3, 4, 5, and 6, which are the suspects. So it is a narrative-rich environment. You have a suspect who didn't do it, but they have a secret. And you can investigate that and learn this story that plays onto this. It's a story within a story within a story. Those of you who do the snowflake method must be just loving the story because it's what it is. It still builds on each other. So eventually it's a story building on about another story. Okay. And because it's the mature genre, it's no longer just who done it. It could be a why done it, a how done it. Oh, will the done it or be caught, which is most thrillers. Think of Columbo. Anybody see Columbo? The most popular television detective of all time, according to a poll done by the people who made Columbo. And Columbo would walk in, the first act, it was a 1-hour show, first act, the crime happens in front of you, the killer bludgeons somebody to death. Take a picture, you see Professor Plum in the library with the candlestick. Okay, who cares? Beginning, and the second act begins, Columbo comes in, looks at everybody and goes, I got a question for you. And for the rest of the story, he just hounds who he thinks did it. And he gets him to trip up. And it's compelling. It's character-driven. It's compelling literature. And that is how will the done-it or be caught. Is kind of what it is. And that still happens. It starts with a crime, ends with a crime. That's all I'm saying. You can call it a mystery. And Columbo's relentless, dogged harassment of the poor son of a bitch who just killed his brother is the story. And it's wonderful, okay? So the basic elements of mystery are these. Anybody got any idea how much time I have? Because I'm on a planet all my own.
6:25.
25 after, okay. Give me signals every now and again, like, all right. All right, the puzzle. This is one of the cornerstones of mystery. You have to have a puzzle. If you don't have a puzzle, you could have a puzzle, and it's like you can have erotica in the middle of a child's book. It's still a child's, no, back it up. You can have a romance in a science fiction and still call it a science fiction. But you cannot not have a puzzle in a mystery and call it a mystery, all right? You have to find out who does it. This is the question. This is the propelling force of the narrative, is the seeking of the answer to the puzzle. You saw that? You like that? All right. You also have to, you have to accept that there's a bar to prove innocence. And this is a breakdown into motive, means, and opportunity. Old, hackneyed, but completely relevant in a mystery. When you are writing a mystery and you're thinking, I should plant a clue here, what should I plant? Look at motive, means, and opportunity. Pick one of them. Have chapter 1 motive. Hint at the motive. Chapter 2, red herring the motive, supply the means. And you slowly pick up these pieces. When all the pieces are together, like in Agatha Christie, you will have a room full of 20 people who all have motive, means, and opportunity. This is not fair play, but they can have it. But these are the pieces that you collect. These are the breadcrumbs, the puzzle pieces that your sleuth will pick up. Sometimes your sleuth is too stupid to pick them up, but the reader will. And this is part of it. We'll get to that. We'll get to the detective. The detection. So crime happens, there's a puzzle, something happened. Somebody killed somebody. somebody case. What's your name?
Shem.
Shen?
Uh-huh.
Somebody from Shen. All right. Now I'm looking at you. So you had motive, you had opportunity and means, but not the motive.
Right.
You, however, are secretly dating his sister, who is in line to inherit. But you didn't have the means. You, who were in love with him, gave him we could do this all day and I could get arrested. But the detection becomes the action. So we have the force that propels it, right? And each chapter, each scene, the conflict becomes the detection. So what do I mean by that? And there are three ways of detection. There's observation, the interview, and the research. Now, observation is probably the most common. You killed it. Observation is when Elmer Leonard famously wrote, take out the stuff in your book that people are going to skip over, which means long descriptions. Mysteries don't get that. Mysteries is okay. Mystery will describe a scene because there's a clue there. You don't have to shine a light on it. It can be in passing. But descriptions are part of the clue process. It's part of the puzzle. Totally fair. Don't go overboard, okay? But you'll want to, for example, if you just describe a room and you kind of, the way you do it makes it sound dingy. Maybe that's a clue to somebody wanting money to build up, to fix the house up. Setting, that's observation. So generally it's what the narrator sees and takes in. So it's first, there's nothing in between the person seeing it and what they see. See what I mean on that? Whereas a witness, an interview, I'm talking to somebody who knows something. Now, it doesn't have to be a witness. Yeah, I saw her stab you 3 times in the back with a pool cue. I don't know where you got the pool cue, but there you was. Right? That's one kind of interview. But it can be other kinds of interview. Anything, because often witnesses, and the best witnesses, don't know they're witnesses. They're just shooting the shit. Yeah, I was out there the other day. I was chasing a dog, and there were all these bright things in the road. I just pushed them off. I didn't care. Bright things? Yeah, I don't know what they were. They were just bugging me, so I pushed them under there. Finds out that those are the bullet casings. Those kind of things work. That's still interview. So it's a clue one step beyond. The interview is great because you can get liars. Looking at you, writers. You're all liars! You can write that on your resume. What do you do? I lie. Oh, yeah, fiction or nonfiction? Politics. Sorry. So still, that's what it is. That's the interview. And that's one of the other processes. And the third one, and this is not to be underestimated, is research. Now, I include such basic things as knowing a car is a thing that moves. Knowing a motorcycle has 2 wheels. These are the kind of things that you consider research. Sometimes you'll get into something that's going to be a little bit more research, like the DNA came back as it was an orangutan. You should have told us that in 1841, man, we had it done. But see what I'm saying? That's research. Now, those of you who write fantasy and want to write a fantasy or a science fiction mystery, which is totally legit, totally cool, don't, 2 thumbs up, your research will have to be tricky. Because even though people will know what a .45 automatic is, they won't know that a phase plasma rifle in the 40-watt range will not pass through 6 inches of ablative armor. Duh. 3, yes. 6, no way. So you have to put that information in there. But you see what I mean? So the world builders, this is another element of world building. Whereas contemporary fiction writers, and this is one of the reasons why contemporary mysteries tend to be so popular, is because they can see into it. I wrote a story called The Big Body where it's based on an actual case where somebody dies of carbon monoxide poisoning. And anybody who's had any experience with carbon monoxide poisoning figures it out by the 3rd paragraph. Everybody else has no idea. And that's basically a test of that. The audience, if you would have read the story in 1933, you would have got it instantly. If you would have read it in 2013, you'd have no idea. You've never seen anybody dead that way. And in 2563, you would recognize a phase plasma rifle burn. So anyway, that's part of the research, and that's part of the clues on how they collect them. Now, your sleuth is your hero. It's often the person you want. Now, here we start getting into maybe he isn't. Okay. But the sleuth is generally the hero. This is the character who will solve the puzzle. Generally, you want them. This is an active character. It doesn't always have to be. Rules change. We're into character now, right? Maybe your character is a complete slob. There's a I can't remember. There's a big, in 1930s, a huge obese detective.
Nero Wolf?
Nero Wolf! Thank you, Nero Wolf. Big obese detective, can't leave his house. So he sends a guy out there to get clues for him, comes back. Totally legit. So he's active in his mind, but the other guys does get active. But generally you want to have your detective active. The other key with a detective, and whenever you start writing your detective stories, you'll have to find a reason for them to be involved. This is why police procedurals are so common, because they're paid to do this crap. Whereas Miss Marple just happened, people keep dying around her. She's a serial killer and she's never found out. You know what I mean? And so you have to find a reason. But okay, but this is going to become the surrogate reader. And as part of a fair play, which again, I've mentioned that again, kind of hinting for this, they will absorb the clues. It's important that your protagonist, your sleuth, have noble qualities of some kind. Because the villain has extraordinary qualities too. Primarily, they're willing to kill somebody. And don't underestimate how much power that gives them. You know, in war maybe not, but in usual case, you've already given your villain, okay, we're talking about villain, but you have to have a sleuth who has certain abilities that can help him solve it. Maybe his special ability is, Sherlock Holmes, a keen mind. Miss Marple, she's nosy and gets in her way. Monk is OCD. He's actually a Poirot version too. Think of all your favorite detectives and see what their particular strength was. My Tony Flanner, in my novels, has been fired by more jobs than most people can imagine. So he knows a lot of shit from all this. And he has a sarcastic, bulletproof sarcasm shell, so he's hard to read. He can't shoot a gun, but he can assault you so badly your children will weep. That's his superpower. But he's weak, he's got flaws, and it's important to give your character flaws. It's why Superman still doesn't work for a modern audience. A rock ain't a flaw, but they're trying to get him that, but it's important that they have some flaws, some weaknesses that they're working through. All right, and
He has a major flaw, Lois Lane.
Lois Lane. Yeah, okay. All right, Lois Lane. It's always a girl at the end of it. But this, but those of you who are familiar with the hero's journey will recognize some of the tropes coming up. How's my time? Okay, this is good. Okay, but one of the things about a mystery is you might have started sensing, those of you all know what the hero's journey is, right? You go out, you go through these different things. That's bullshit. This isn't a hero's journey, but it is a quest. It is a quest. You can't make it a hero's journey if you feel like it. And something I want to blow your minds about. Those of you who have studied literature and studied writing know that your character has to change, right? They have to be given problems, and they overcome them, and they have a personal change. Can you imagine what happened if after every Sherlock Holmes he was going, "Oh, Watson, I have now learned to love"? No. Believe it or not, that is not necessary. In your origin story, think of all the superheroes. There they can change to become who they are. Later, it becomes the villain, and your character strong enough can react to them and come out of it the same way. So you don't necessarily need to have a character change, but you do need to have flaws and strengths. And you need a worthy villain. Now, this is also questionable. Maybe it turns out it was an accident the whole time. But often you want, it is a battle of sorts. It's a quest. It's a Jabberwocky. You've got to have something out there worthy of the trouble. And remember that they have powers, usually they'll kill somebody, which is a big deal. That's Moriarty, if you don't know. You memorize that face, he will push you off. Actually, you won't. Yes. One of my favorites is a very easy villain to give him, what does a villain have that is easily done, and that's giving them power and money in our modern society. A lowly police detective, "You're getting too close to the senator, I'm going to back you out of this, but the truth matters." And then it comes into a real situation of how much power can keep you, so I say it's totally hypothetical. Say you're the president of the United States and you're caught doing something very bad. Can anybody touch you? How can you deal with that power? Same kind of thing. That, at least in the corporate shills, corporate CEOs are often very good villains because they have a nefarious plan. But these are the kind of things that can be challenging them. So the villain has to be worth the trouble. Sometimes the villain could just be a maniac serial killer who can't be figured out, but they still have some strengths because of that. Okay, fair play. Foreshadowing. Who likes foreshadowing? Who hates foreshadowing? That's the door. All right, I need you. You can stay. Foreshadowing is why we think God knows what he's doing. Because when something happens, because human beings as a species look for patterns. It's how we survived the bad times. And I'm not talking about the Bush years. I'm talking about the caveman years, where everything was trying to kill us. And we learned, see, the last time we left the campfire in the middle of the night, grog didn't come back. We're not going to do that. So we learn by patterns. It's actually part of our thinking. And so we like it when we see things, we will try to make a pattern, try to make a meaning out of it, all right? Pieces of a puzzle, small little clues, we're deductive reasoners by nature. And so as we're putting these pieces together, we want them to make a larger whole, okay? So foreshadowing does that, because you put a piece of information, something, when it comes back, it has a place in your mind.
So these things would be like the research, the interviews, the observation. Would that be one thing that Encyclopedia Brown, for instance, is famous for, is the research is not always intuitive to the target audience?
Right. Generally, you'll have somebody walk in and say, well, we just got the satellite pictures and we zoomed into 600,000 times and here's a picture. It's basically a cheat sheet. It's the weakest form, the least dramatic of the kinds of things. I highly recommend observation and dialogue, which is basically description and dialogue. You can break it down. But here we're talking about fair play, where part of the fun of a mystery is the puzzle. And if you have if you've written your story first, if you know what happens, even if you pants through the rest of the story, the second story, knowing what happened, you cannot go wrong. Because you will put the pieces in there that when the final comes to the end, it makes sense. The pieces that led you here make sense. The final climax of any story should be inevitable surprise, right?
Yeah.
When you get there, of course, oh, that's so great, it could go no other way. I don't know, I can't see that. And that's that moment, particularly in mysteries. So the idea of fair play means that the detective gets no information that the reader is not privy to. The reader has every chance to solve the puzzle before or with the detective. I mentioned Ellery Queen before. There was a famous thing in Ellery Queen's books that have been translated into the movies they made about him. And it's called, famously, the Ellery Queen moment. Now, Ellery Queen was two guys, but it was written under the idea of a single-person detective named Ellery Queen. He said, this particular, and it's an all first person. I got the case on this day, and then I went at it. And then there comes a moment in the book, about 3/4 of the way, where he breaks the fourth wall completely. He says, well, reader, you now have all the clues. Can you figure it out? The next day, I decided to have a coffee and gets right back into the story. The Ellery Queen moment. Complete fair play. That can be done. And that's often done today. No, it's kind of fallen off. Often you'll see, oh, during the last commercial break, we got a fax, and it was you. Because his alibi is and that happens too much. All right. Think about that. You need realism and logic. Deus ex machina and just things that make no sense are really common in mysteries because pantsers tend to write themselves into a corner, don't know what to do. And in mystery, where it's kind of more of a puzzle and you got to have all the pieces that fit, it tends to happen and you kind of get into problems. This is just good writing. The characters need to resemble real people. The situations, though unlikely, are still possible. And even if you're writing fantasy and your detective can read minds, there still has to have you still have to sell that, you know what I mean? In most good mysteries, coincidence and dumb luck are downplayed. You can have a hunch, your character can have a hunch, and there could be something tricky, and usually there's something called the breakthrough clue. And often the breakthrough clue is so obscure that only the detective gets it unless you're really paying attention. In the cat who solved the mysteries, sometimes the cat will be sitting on a newspaper with her paws out there, and between the paws is a word that gives the whole thing away. Oh, flabbergast! I get it now. Next chapter we see how it all works. Okay. Or sometimes there was a famous Poirot where Captain Hastings was saying, yeah, Lady Velvet was sitting next to Sir Tom. No, it was the other way around. Oh, that's it. That's it. The clue was the other way around. That was it. Who cares who's sitting where? But when he said that, Poirot had the epiphany, and it made sense. That's a breakthrough clue. That can be clever, and you can do that with luck. You can inconsistencies. Okay, I told you about this earlier. This is the Freytag pyramid. We've all seen this baby? Yeah? Those of you who don't, anybody not seen anything like this before? I'm about to blow your minds. Okay, Freytag is a name for, I don't know if this works, we're going to try it. This is basically the narrative structure of most modern novels. We have the setup, often considered the first act. This is like in movies, this is the first 9-10 minutes. It's the setup, it's the status quo, what's happening now. Harry's living under a stair. Setup, first act. Later on, there's an inciting incident. An owl is harassing the family. By the way, Harry Potter is a mystery. No, it truly is. It starts with a mystery.
The first 4 books are mysteries.
Yeah. Is that the one with Dolores Umbridge? Because that just becomes torture.
No, that's 5.
Okay, yeah, first 4, we're going there. Okay, so, and then in Act 2, this is kind of Act 2, this is where all the fun stuff happens, you know. James Bond is shot at, he sleeps with this girl, he has to go to the clinic, comes back, and eventually, that's in the second act, and eventually we have a breaking point of the climax where whatever trouble he's going through can no longer be tolerated, must be solved. Boom, it's solved. And then we have the falling action where they explain what happened, and everybody goes out to bed, you know, basically, the main climax has happened, the ships fly back from the Death Star, and yeah, we did it. And then we have the denouement, which is them getting this is the push. This is coming off, this is reacting to the solution of this. The slaves are free, they win the cup, and then here is what happened, happily ever after, in a new, higher stage. This is my Freytag pyramid, usually it's down here. In the old days, we'd have about a quarter mile of this and 2 miles of this to describe what happened to everybody and their cousins. That's what we do. But you can see the basic format of this. And this is kind of what we still do. We have a denouement. But in the mysteries, this is a very condensed setup here. Setup, get to the crime. The story begins when there's a crime. Often your first opening scene will be somebody coming to a crime scene. You do not want any background, minimum. I break this rule hard because I'm cool and stupid, but this is generally the way the rule is. The book begins with the exciting incident, with the crime, and ends with the solution, and the investigation in between. And during the investigation, while he's looking at clues, this is rife with flashback of who and everything else. So this all plays into it thematically. And then there's a moment in mystery, they call it the climax and the solution to reveal. Since there's in thrillers, this will be a shootout, somebody will blow themselves up, you know. But in mysteries, often they'll just be a reveal. Well, I mean, there'll be like a shootout, right? A death, and then sometimes they'll mix the reveal and the coda. The reveal is, you did it, I know why, here's how. You take him away in chains, or he's dead, or something. Basically, the detective solves the mystery at the climax. The coda is a specific mystery device. It does not exist in any other genre. The coda is that magical time in all good mysteries where the clues are described. The clues that were not described in the reveal are explained here. Well, what about that missing book? Well, the book, that had me going too for a while until I remember that Miss Simmons threw the book at the bird. Oh, right. And the red herrings are explained away. It's the answer sheet. It's a puzzle, this is the answer sheet. And this Freytag pyramid is modern crime. And the basic formula is this. Set up crime, get the case. That's usually it. The investigation, you find motive, means, and opportunity. You collect suspects. You create theories. You follow leads. There'll be red herrings. There'll be dead ends. There'll be a breaking clue, revealing coda, and the denouement, which usually says, I chose a wrong week to quit smoking cigarettes, or something stupid. But for the most part, these are the pieces. Now, the yellow pieces are generally messed up. Sometimes getting the case can come late. Sometimes, and the suspects can have their own minor things. But this is basically what mystery is about. These plot points is, you can write good mysteries with these plot points. That's the basic formula of the mystery. And remember, it is a quest. Now, I love mystery. Most of my books, I like to base it on mystery. Now, the characters change. I have one series, but otherwise I write kind of one-offs. The characters change. And their personal journey mirrors the journey they're taking in the quest they're looking for. I have a character who's looking for her father, so she has all these daddy issues, and I carry on. But it is a quest. All the rules you know are there. You have all these different pieces. It's seeking truth. It is a true and glorious quest. And this is what I'll leave you with. Those of you who write or read literary fiction know that when you're reading and the language is lush, and it's filling you with ideas and minds and feelings, these are clues. These are foreshadows. These are images that connect with other images to form a complete whole of the literary element. In other words, the theme. And as a literary fiction will lead you to meaning through the different foreshadowed or the different elements, it's the same thing in a mystery, where a mystery drops clues that later connected together form an answer. There is a direct relationship between literary and mystery. And those of you who want to write both can have a very easy time with it by remembering that. And I knew this professor tell me once, could every story be a mystery? And I said, how do you figure that? He says, because you don't know what it's about when you open it. He had tenure, I wasn't going to say anything. So yeah, but the other thing about the mystery is as you have these basic structural plot points, you can discuss anything as you go with it. It is just a framework of the story. That's why it being a mature genre is so great. Because you can hang anything, imagine a framework of a building. You can do it, it's going to stand up. It's going to have plot points, it's going to have this, but you can discuss anything because it's a quest, it's a journey. You can discuss major issues such as child abuse, sexism, environmental collapse, money laundering, whatever you want. But it is a framework with which you can investigate other stories. Harry Potter investigated being brought into being born famous in the form of a mystery. The mystery begins, who's this boy and who's trying to kill him? And it ends with the unveiling of the killer. And there's even a coda and a reveal when Dumbledore, at the end of the book, goes through everything. It's very, very mystery-oriented. You put Agatha Christie and J.K. Rowling in the room, they'll have a lot to talk about. Like, why are you dead? What's that smell? One quick pitch. Those of you who have books and want to query them, I teach a class at the University of Utah starting in March called Literary Querying, the Art of Rejection. I teach you which Kleenexes are the best for your eyes as you get these rejections. But we go through query letters and such. Blatant plug. If you're interested, this is on my website. Anyway, we have a few minutes. Any questions? We have minutes. Shoot, what do you got?
Does the mystery always have to be a murder?
Hell no. Hell no. A lot of the best, cozies particularly often shy away from that. And they also are not very violent. It can be who stole, like the Boxcar Kids. Those are mysteries. Something is stolen. But the trick is with any conflict, the stakes have to be important. And if they're important to the characters, they'll be important to the readers. So if it's somebody stole my mother's favorite cake dish, that's significant. It can be a quest to find who did that. And while they find the quest of who stole that dish, we find out why the dish is important, and it can explode that way. It doesn't have to be murder. Murder is usually used as a shortcut because it is the highest thing we can think of. Later thrillers have pushed it to thermonuclear destruction, so you get a lot of deaths. But it's just, but no, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be at all. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense to have dumb violence in there. Any other questions? Shoot, what you got?
Do you have a recommendation for a good story? You said the combination of literary and mystery.
I have to first throw out The Big Sleep. The Big Sleep, notice particularly the noir voice. The thing about noir, everybody thinks it's black and white. Noir wasn't black and white. Noir was gray. And that is the difference between the golden age. It is very, very, there's sometimes in life when the world just makes sense. So when noir happened and this gritty kind of thing, they called it noir, they called it black because of the story, but it's in black and white, it all makes sense. But noir, whereas in the golden age we had good guys and bad guys, the villain did it, maybe, all this, but in noir, the Sam Spade is as bad as anybody. Mike Hammer is a psychopath. His idea of a good interrogation is brass knuckles, whereas Miss Marple prefers a whip. No, that's not true. But what I'm saying is that there's gray there, and that's what I love The Big Sleep. It's a fantastic story, and if you can tell me who killed the chauffeur after the first reading, I'll give you a prize. By the way, when they made that into the movie with Bogart, the Maltese Falcon, by the way, was made 3 times before they got it right. It got past the Hays Code. Remember, you know the Hays Code for Hollywood? Very rigid rules of what you can do morally speaking. You have 2 beds in a room, you know, kissing. You can never have a gunshot and the victim in the same scene. It's always cut to me. All these kind of things. And one of the things is the bad guy never gets away. Justice is always served. But because Dashiell Hammett's book was so muddy and you didn't know who did it, oh gosh, I mean, the noir of this time. I mean, you have stories by Hemingway, edited by F. Scott Fitzgerald, directed by Hawks. It's like, blows your mind. But anyway, it got through it, and if you know the story and you figured out who did what and why, she got away. Even in the movie, the bad guy, the killer, escapes. Anyway, if you have any questions, I have cards I can give to you. I'm easy to find, johnnyworthen.com. It's a wonderful website. Spend minutes there. Thank you.